Hi, my name's Tyler Lidwell. I'm a film photographer and I'm intrigued by documenting abandoned landscapes. One of my most memorable experiences with film photography is when I took a trip to my home state of Pennsylvania. I brought a new 35mm film camera I just picked up and a set of two lenses, a 28 and a 50mm. Going into the trip, I knew that there were a few locations in mind that I wanted to capture on film, so I hopped on Google Earth and I kind of pinpointed where I wanted to go. The three locations that I really wanted to capture were Mount Washington. It just oversees the entire skyline of Pittsburgh, so that's one location I really wanted to hit. The second location was just the streets of Pittsburgh, capturing the everyday life, people going to work, people coming from work, just documenting that kind of landscape. And the third was exploring just outside of the city. You can get to countryside. I felt a sense of nostalgia being back in Pittsburgh with my new film camera because I had been to these three locations before, but I had shot them digitally. And being in a similar environment, but having a new medium, it was something entirely different. And so I guess it just kind of made me feel like it was a different perspective, but the same, if that makes sense. It's always fascinating going back to my hometown and seeing these locations that A, still might be in business, B, they're demolished to the ground, or C, they're there and they're just not in business any longer. For instance, there was a diner that I used to go to as a teenager, and I went to that location thinking that, hey, this could be a cool photograph, only to find out that it was demolished to the ground. And so years ago, when I did digital photography, I have pictures of being inside of that diner. And the same way I photograph now, nothing's really changed, only the aspect of film is timeless. So when you look at the photograph, you could maybe see that it was shot in 2023, but in fact, it looks like it's from 1980. And with digital, you just don't get those little imperfections. Going back to my hometown, it's just interesting to see the different aspects of life. Not everything's happy all the time. And so I think it's really important for me to document that and remember that these places aren't going to be around forever. After my experience of seeing the abandoned building and just knowing what it used to be, that kind of shook me up a little bit. And so while going to Mount Washington to see the sunrise, it was this sense of peace and acceptance, but still excitement up on top of Mount Washington, overseeing the skyline of Pittsburgh. It was this very peaceful moment. I went through an entire roll of film and it felt great. After the sun had risen, I made my way down to the streets of Pittsburgh, and there I captured everyone commuting to work. You know, like I mentioned before, teenagers hanging out. It was summertime, so you had all different walks of life. I'd started off with seeing this kind of like sadness of abandonment, peacefulness of seeing the sunrise, and then the upbeat nature of the city. And so after the streets, I went to the countryside to kind of end my day. And so that was kind of therapeutic where you're slowing down. It's like a roller coaster of emotion. I shipped off my film to my film lab, packed my bags, and the next day I was on an airplane back to Tucson and I awaited these glorious, glorious images. The process of waiting for your film developed is always a bittersweet feeling because in the world of social media nowadays, everything is so instant. And so I think our mind is kind of trained to want that instant gratification. And by shooting film, you don't really get that. So when you send your film to a lab, it might be 2 weeks until you get your film developed. But once you get the email from the lab and opening up those film scans, it's like Christmas morning. There's no better feeling than it because you can relive those memories as opposed to just looking on the back of the screen after you take your photo. So after my flight back, I was kind of like anxious but excited because, something might have happened in development. Maybe there's something you did wrong. 2 weeks had passed by and I got an email from my lab. Couldn't have been more excited. Clicked on the email, just ready to relive these moments. And guess what happened? 6 of the rolls came back blank. One of them turned out okay, but there were 16 exposures on one image. When I got this feedback, it had made me feel like I was a failure. I did all of this prep work to best set myself up for success on this trip. But when you shoot film, there might be things that happen, and it's not a fault of your own. Film photography for me has taught me more patience in my everyday life, and that is my most memorable moment of shooting film so far.